A few years ago, I was renting a house in North California. The neighborhood was just outside the suburbs. It seemed like the perfect balance of having space and having nice neighbors close enough not to feel isolated. The area had no streetlights, so it was very dark at night, especially if there were clouds blocking the moonlight. It didn't bother me though, it made my little house feel even more quaint on darker nights. I got home from work one day in mid-fall. It was a cloudy night, so pulling up to my house, I only saw what my headlights and front porch lights illuminated. When I got out of my car, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. That was odd, as I had never smelled that before around that house. I didn't see anybody nearby, so I ignored it and went inside. I had just got off a shift with a few hours of overtime, so I felt pretty tired. Even though it wasn't even 7 yet, I decided to take a shower and call it a night. I woke up sometime later, sure that I heard a noise inside my house. I wasn't worried right away because my friend would sometimes stop by to use my shower after work on his way to his night classes. I even gave him a spare key so he could stop by even if I wasn't home. He would always text me to let me know beforehand though, and I hadn't heard my phone go off. I reached over to my bedside table and picked up my cell phone to see if my friend had sent me a text. The bright light from my phone screen and number pad blinded me. These were the days before phones had light sensor that would dim the screen in the dark, and this particular phone was so bright I could use it as a flashlight. Through squinted eyes I could make out that it was 9 something, but I couldn't tell if I had an unread text or anything. I set my phone aside and called out my friend's name. There were a couple seconds of silence before I heard loud footfalls as someone started running through the bottom floor of my house. I leapt out of my bed and ran to the closet. They were already up the stairs by the time I opened the door and stepped inside. The house had 3 rooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms on either side of the hallway, the one I was in, and a spare, and a bathroom at the end. The bedroom doors were both closed, but the bathroom door was cracked open. I heard whoever was in the house thunder down the hallway past my door and into the bathroom. Thank God he did. That gave me enough time to open the attic in the ceiling of my closet and hoist myself up. I had just started to lift myself up when the person ran back out of the bathroom. My feet were barely inside of the attic when the bedroom door burst open. I heard footsteps run into my room and stop. When they didn't see me in the room, they ran back to the hallway and into the other room, which I had just boxes stacked in a corner, some weights, and a table where I pointed my miniature models. I guess they decided if someone was hiding, it would be in the bedroom because they charged back into my room and turned on the light. A moment later, the closet door was ripped open. I had crouched in my attic just a foot or so away from the axis, so I could try to stop them if they started to climb up. From my vantage point, all I could see was from their knees down. They were wearing dirty blue jeans with frayed cuffs and worn work boots. After a few seconds of looking in the closet, they stepped away and I heard a loud crash come from my room, followed by a scream of frustration and anger. That scream was the most unnerving part of the incident for me. It reminded me far too much of my stepfather, who would scream in a similar way when he lost his temper. He would eventually be put in a mental hospital for several mental disorders that resulted in erratic and violent tendencies. The man in my house ran back downstairs. I heard crashes and clatters as things were thrown around and furniture was knocked over. I stayed crouched in the attic. I had left my cell phone when I ran for the closet, and I wasn't certain I could climb down without him hearing me. After some time, the noises stopped. I started counting slowly. When I reached 1,000, I decided it was safe enough to climb down and call the police. The first thing I noticed when I exited the closet was the intruder had flipped my bed over, I assume in an attempt to find me. That was the loud noise I had heard after he stepped away from the closet. I couldn't find my cell phone, so I went to the landline by the bed and called the police. I waited in my room until I heard them call out from downstairs. The first floor was a mess, but I had expected that. Chairs had been knocked over, the sofa had been flipped. All the books, pictures, knickknacks I had on my shelves were strewn across the floor. The cupboards in the kitchen had been opened and all the boxes and canned food had been thrown to the ground. As far as I could tell though, the only thing missing was a single knife out of the wooden block in my kitchen. The police checked the house from top to bottom. They found that the side door had been forced open by something like a crowbar. They also found a few cigarette butts along my fence line, with some foil and an empty pen tube, which the police said people often used to smoke meth, so they thought he had been watching my house for a while. I realized that he must have been out there smoking a cigarette when I got home. They collected up the evidence and told me I should stay with my family and friends that night and get that door fixed as soon as possible. I opted to just not sleep. I moved a shelf over to block the broken door and spent the next couple hours cleaning things up. I would often go to the window with a flashlight and shine it along the fence line where the police found the cigarette butts and foil, but I didn't see anything. The next day I called to have the door fixed and motion lights installed at the back and sides of my house. I ran a phone cable up the attic and added a landline. I never wanted to be stuck up there without a phone again. Nothing else happened at the house though. I lived there another 3 years without incident. One more precaution I took was practicing getting out of my bed, going to my closet and climbing into the attic as quickly and quietly as possible. I even kept at it when I moved, except now I go to a crawl space at the back of the closet instead of the attic. I try not to think about what would have happened if I had been a bit slower getting to the attic, or if he hadn't gone into the bathroom at the end of the hallway first. So last night I was at a classmate's house working on a group project we have due tomorrow. I live in an apartment in the town where our university is located, and my classmate lives at his parents' house, which is in the foothills just outside of town. In order to get to the house, you have to drive along a relatively secluded and narrow 2-lane road for about 5 or 6 miles. We started working on the project at about 6 p.m, and I ended up hanging around for a while after we had finished our work. So I left his house pretty late at about 11 and started down the road back towards town. I didn't realize how tough it would be to navigate the road at night. There were no streetlights, and the road was unkempt and riddled with potholes. On top of this, I had no cell service, so I had to drive very slowly to make sure I didn't blow out one of my tires, since I had used my spare one a couple weeks back. I figured I was about 3 miles from the house when I rounded a tight corner and saw a pickup truck with a camper shell parked diagonally across the road. The manner in which it was parked completely impeded my path, and I couldn't drive around it because there was a gully on both sides of the road. The only way for me to go at this point was backwards, where there was a pull-off that I could use to turn my car around. At first I couldn't see inside the cab, but when I turned on my high beams, I saw that there was a man slouched over in the driver's seat, his head resting against the steering wheel, as if he had been knocked out after a bad accident. I immediately sensed something was wrong. The way his car had just coincidentally come to a rest in a position that totally blocked the road was a big red flag for me. I had heard stories of people playing dead in the road as a way to lure unsuspecting people out of their cars so they could rob them. I decided fuck this shit and elected to go back to my classmate's house and explain what was going on. I threw the car into reverse and kept my eyes darting back and forth between my rear view and the truck. I looked and saw that I was almost to the pull-off where I could turn around. When I looked back, my heart skipped about 5 beats. The man who had been slouched over in the driver's seat was now walking at my car at a hurried pace, while a few other men jumped out of the camper shell and started moving towards me as well. I panicked and accelerated backwards into the pull-off, which messed up the undercarriage of my car pretty badly. As I put it into drive, the guy was already at my passenger side door tugging on the handle, which thank the Lord was locked. I only caught a brief glimpse of him, but his face appeared to be scabbed and leathery. Definitely a meth head or some sort of drug abuser. I sped away and didn't slow down at all until I reached the house, constantly checking my rear view to see if they were following me. Thankfully they didn't tail me, and when I reached the house I explained what had happened to my classmate, and we called the cops. I was grateful that my buddy's parents were kind enough to let me stay the night. They didn't find anyone on the road matching the description, but I filed an incident report and they told me they would be on the lookout for similar vehicles and suspicious activity. But holy shit, I'm still so shook up over it. I keep getting the same adrenaline rush I got when I saw the guy charging me, whenever I think about it. When I was 11, my family of 6 decided to make the move from a suburbia to a lovely rural bungalow. I have 3 sisters, aged 9, 12, and 18 at the time. We were all excited for the privacy and isolation of our new home. For once in our lives, we would have no neighbors and a large yard to play in. Our home had large windows, giving us a beautiful view of the farmland around us. My parents disliked curtains because there were no neighbors and they collect dust, so we all figured, what's the point? The summer there was so much fun. Every morning I would get up and take my dog for a walk around the woods in our backyard. I absolutely adored the feeling of being alone and was enjoying the freedom of our new space. Fall eventually rolled around, and I continued my routine of walking my dog, both in the morning and after school. I remember one morning while walking my dog, I began feeling uncomfortable. I was alone in the woods, there was no one around, but I still felt as though I was being watched. I had shivers down my back the entire walk, and for an 11-year-old, I just felt really strange. My dog was acting weird too. I kept trying to go further into the woods, but she kept trying to pull me towards our shed. The shed rested at the very back of our yard, on the edge of the woods where the trees thin out quite a bit. I didn't like how I was feeling, so I picked up my dog and brought her back to the house and went on with my day. Days went by, and I just couldn't seem to shake this feeling of being watched, especially when I was in my bedroom, which had a huge window in it that overlooked our backyard. The view of the woods that I had previously loved was beginning to scare me. I assumed it was just because it was fall, and the forest started looking kinda gloomy. I started having nightmares about waking up in the middle of the night and seeing the figure of a man in our backyard. Weird things kept happening around our house. We all suddenly noticed that we were eating things like bread a lot quicker. Every morning, half a loaf of bread would be gone, and my parents attributed this to their hungry growing children. One evening, I woke up and heard noises coming from our family kitchen, which was just down the hall from our bedroom. It sounded like someone had come home, and I assumed it was my oldest sister. The only thing that was strange was her footsteps sounded a lot heavier than they usually do. The noise stopped very quickly, and I was able to fall back asleep. In the morning, my mom asked me and my two sisters, 9 and 12 years old, if we woke up last night to make food. We all said no, and then I asked if it was my oldest sister. My mom told me that she stayed at her friend's house last night, and then thought it was probably the dog making noise. I was terrified. I knew I heard unfamiliar footsteps. That night, I had a lot of trouble sleeping. I still felt like someone was watching me. Eventually, I fell asleep, but woke up around 2:30 a.m. I heard noises in the house again. It was the same footsteps I had heard before. I stayed in my bed and felt paralyzed. I rolled over and faced the window, hoping that if someone came into my room, they'd think I was asleep. The noises stopped, and I closed my eyes as hard as I could. I told myself I was just imagining things, and that monsters aren't real. About an hour must have gone by, and I eventually opened my eyes. When I looked out the window, I swear to God, I could see a man standing in our backyard watching our house. I was terrified enough that I didn't move at all, and eventually fell asleep again. I was so relieved to wake up alive that morning, but was still terrified of our backyard. I ran into the kitchen to tell my mom what I saw, and refused to walk the dog. I'm not sure if she really believed me at the time, or thought I was having night terror hallucinations, which I did quite often when I was younger. I went to school that morning. I was anxious all day. The last thing I wanted to do was go home. When I did get home, I saw police vehicles surrounding the house. They had the dogs with them and were searching our yard. They told us a man who had broken into another home and beaten the couple living there was suspected of being on our property. He stole their wallets, photos, and other small items of value. The biggest thing he stole was their car, which had been ditched 10 kilometers from our home. While searching our property, they found all items from his previous break-ins, hidden around our yard. They also discovered that he had been hiding in our shed since his previous break-in. They said he had done this at the previous home prior to breaking in. He would spend his time watching the house and observing the residents' routine until he knew it well enough to start coming inside the house. They said he had a long history of premeditated violence, including child abuse, and believed he was planning on eventually harming us all. In the shed they found wrappers, empty cans of food, and scraps. They told us he was definitely coming into our house for the food during the night. From the shed he had a perfect view of our home. I could see when we all went to bed. Although they searched our house and property with the dogs, they didn't find him. After that day, I realized that if you feel like you're being watched, you probably are. I work at a cafe downtown. Quite a few homeless shelters in range, and a huge drug problem. One day I was working behind the bar, and this redhead kid, probably in his early 20s, sits down in our seating area and starts chanting shit under his breath. After a minute or two, he starts moving his hands around like he's casting a spell. He then gets up and starts yelling and disturbing everyone. I walk over to him and tell him he needs to leave for the day. Dude looks me straight in the eye and says, "This is all a giant game. I'll fucking kill you with one finger." At this point, whatever. I get death threats a lot here, no biggie. Shoo him on his way and that's it. Fast forward to when we're closing up, around 9 p.m. I lock the doors and start heading to the parking garage my car is in. It's probably about 6 blocks away, no big deal. Winter up here is insanely dark, so it's pretty creepy in downtown. About a block or two of walking, and I hear this hissing noise. I freak the fuck out because I can't see anyone around me. I pick up the pace a bit, then I hear hurried footsteps in the snow behind me. Fuck that. I booked it to the staircase for the garage because I wasn't going to wait for the elevator. I'm about to staircase up and I hear the door I just went through slam shut. I finally made it to my car to get in as fast as possible. I look around, and lo and behold, there's the redhead from earlier. Only this time, he's fucking furious. He sees me in my car and books it full speed and starts hitting my windows, screaming, "I'm gonna fucking kill you." I door checked him and drove the fuck away. Called the cops the next morning and they found the dude. Apparently he thinks he's in the Illuminati and completely corroborated my story to the police. Small jail time and 1 restraining order later, I never saw him again. Shit like this happens way too much. My roommate and I went to a birthday party. Neither of us were drinking that night. 2 a.m. came around and the club closed, so we started our 45-minute drive home. It's 2 a.m. and no one is on the road, except for us most of the drive. About 30 minutes into the drive, I noticed someone in my rearview mirror traveling pretty close behind me. Whatever, I think. People are assholes and tailgate all the time. Well, we live in the country in a very small town, so the longer this person followed us, the stranger I thought it was. Still, I'm not that worried, because it's probably just a coincidence. So you know how when you're paranoid and think someone is following you, and every turn you make, you anxiously watch your mirror to see if they keep following you? Yeah, I started doing that. I got off the expressway, she followed. Weird, but not that weird. Other people do live here. At this point I joke to my friend that someone is following us. He laughs and tries to get a look at the car behind us. He jokes that it looks like some old pickup, and its driver probably just wants to chain us to a broken radiator in his basement and rape us for a few decades. It's a joke we had been repeating a lot since we'd moved to this area a few months ago. We turn down another road and they follow. Weird. That we turn again and they follow. What the fuck? We turn again and they follow. Okay, we are legitimately scared now. We come to a 4-way stop. I put on my left turn signal, but turn right. You know, to try and throw them off. But they don't take the bait. They stay close behind us. At this point, they start swerving their truck a little, flashing their bright lights and honking at us. We start to freak out. My friend more so than me. I was trying to keep my shit together so I can stay focused on the road. I slam my brakes on. I throw my car in park and wait. The truck came to a stop behind us and just revved his engine over and over and kept honking his horn. Is it someone we know? My friend hoped. Do you really think that? I said. Worry was thick in my voice. We gotta get out of here, he responded. He was terrified, and so was I. I put the car in drive and took off again. I was traveling as quickly as I could down dark, winding, unfamiliar country roads, and this guy was right on my ass. I took the last turn down our dead-end road. We were the last driving on the right. Why the fuck did we go down this way? My friend wails. Fuck, I don't know. I was worried. It's only about half a mile to our house, and I really don't know what to do. I'm honestly considering slamming my brakes and ramming him with my car in reverse. We see our driveway, and the end of the road. In the face of an unknown threat, my mind and body just kinda took over. I slammed the car in park, leapt out the car, and charged the truck behind us. I'm also screaming at the top of my lungs. Something in my brain kept repeating, "Bite their fucking face off." I can remember charging the truck and trying to open the driver's door. It was locked, so I started beating on the door glass with my fists, screaming, "I'll fucking kill you," screaming the whole time. I then ran around the truck to the passenger door. Just as I'm trying to open the door, I see a skinny arm reach over and push the lock down. It is a girl, likely in her early 20s, in a dress looking like she is on her way to or from a party. Now I'm losing my mind at this point. My brain is telling me to calm down, it's only a young girl. But my body just won't let me, so I keep screaming and pounding on her truck. She's on her phone and has the look of absolute terror on her face. I start kicking the side of the truck, screaming for her to get out of here. She turned her car around as fast as she could while I'm still freaking out and assaulting it. I even chased her down the road a little bit. My friend finally pops out of the car, white as a ghost. He asks what happened. I told him I don't know. It was just some girl. I'm still having a lot of trouble calming down too. I'm pacing while my friend is trying to pump me for information. He said he froze out of complete fear and was apologizing. Are you okay? He keeps asking me. I thought someone was here to hurt us. Seriously. What it came down to was, I thought that if that truck had a couple of people in it who were out to hurt us, then I needed to brutalize one of them quickly enough that the others would flee. That was honestly all that was on my mind. I actually kind of scared myself in this fight or flight response. Anyways, all parties involved had a bizarre story to share with their friends. Our best guess was that someone was supposed to be following their friend home, got lost, thought they found their friend, but found us instead. But with all the details of the ride, that doesn't make any sense either. You hear stories about people unknowingly squatting in other people's homes, but never think it would actually happen to you. This happened to me. About 10 years ago, I was living alone in a 2-family house on the 2nd floor with my then toddler. For the story to make sense, I need to try and explain the layout and the backstory. My brother's close friend at the time lived on the 1st floor, and is the one who referred me to the landlord. We had private front entrances, but a shared back entrance with a staircase that ran from the basement all the way to the 2nd floor. I would frequently leave my back door unlocked because I had a habit of locking my keys in the house, and my downstairs neighbor could let me in the back door. The downstairs neighbor had a friend who was kind of down and out. He had a history of substance abuse but was supposedly clean at the time. He was a relatively nice guy, and my neighbor had been letting him stay on his couch for a while. But the neighbor had a 4-year-old daughter, and having someone constantly sleeping on the couch without any plans of finding a permanent living situation was becoming disruptive to their everyday lives. Neighbor tells him he needs to go. It was summertime, so the friend decided he's going to sleep on the couch on our covered porch. We told him that's not acceptable, and when we asked him to leave, we meant the property in general. It had also become abundantly clear that he was using again, and his behavior had become somewhat erratic. He was also making a lot of unsolicited advances on me, which had become increasingly uncomfortable. He wasn't happy, but it isn't our problem. He stopped coming around when we no longer saw him around town. Fast forward a month or two, and I noticed things going missing. Jewelry, small amounts of money left around the house, lighters, inconsequential items I had written off as lost. This house was old with paper-thin walls. The back door in question was right next to the bathroom, along one side of the shower. It also made a very distinct noise when opened. One day my car was at the mechanic, so it probably appeared that I wasn't home. I'm showering, and I swear I heard the back door open. I freeze, practically stop breathing. But after a few minutes, when nobody murdered me American Psycho style, I wrote it off again. I'm a notorious wimp, and had a history since childhood of thinking every strange noise was a potential murderer. This was a long time ago, so I don't remember the exact length of time, possibly a few weeks. The basement was really big and shared, and the landlord also stored stuff down there. It was very packed with some very dark corners. We rarely went down there. The landlord comes by one day and goes down to the basement. He hears a strange noise, grabs a baseball bat, and finds this man in our basement. The man pushed the landlord down, ran out of the house and down the street. We call the police, who find him hiding in a trash can around the corner. You can't make this shit up. Upon further investigation, we find the basement window had been ever so slightly propped open. In the back corner behind some boxes was a nest of blankets filled with our missing items, plus some drug paraphernalia. It reminded me of a creature's nest under stairs at Grimald's place. It's from Harry Potter if you don't know. He had also left his flip phone behind in the chaos where we found a lot of pictures of me sleeping. This man had been high on crack, living in our basement, and regularly entering my apartment, both when I wasn't home and when I was sleeping for months. While he seemed like a nice guy, he was regularly high on hard drugs, and that changes people. I still get chills knowing he could have done anything to me and my child, and I would have never seen it coming. The worst part is that the charges somehow got dropped, and they never gave us an option as the victims. This was not even close to his first criminal offense. My state is notoriously soft on non-violent criminals, regardless of whether it was a victimless crime or not. My local police department is also notorious for making deals in exchange for information on even small-time dealers. We didn't get any justice. Luckily, this didn't have much lasting effect on my mental health, just more of a what the fuck. Can't believe that really happened. Feels like a fever dream. I'm a process server. If you don't know what that is, I basically deliver legal papers to people at their home or place of work. These papers could be anything from foreclosures to child support papers and etc. I have to serve papers to plenty of criminals and sketchy people in general, so I always try to be very careful. Sometimes I serve papers at night because people tend to be at home more often after 5 p.m. Sometimes I have to serve papers to people who live way out in the woods, in the middle of nowhere. These people are my least favorite to serve now, and I will explain why. A few months ago, I had to serve a paper to someone who lived way out in the woods. I probably drove 25 minutes out into the middle of nowhere. It was also when there was still snow on the ground, and it was really dark out. I live in one of the most northern states, so winters are brutal. The situation already made me nervous because I was in the middle of nowhere, and I had bad cell reception. If my car broke down, or if I got a flat tire, I would be in major trouble. Once I started to pull up to the house, I decided not to pull all the way into the driveway because it didn't look well plowed, and I didn't want my car getting stuck. They had a short driveway that went up to a tall fence, so the back of my car was sticking out a few inches towards the road because I didn't pull all the way in. When I went to walk up towards the house, I realized the fence was padlocked, and it was too tall to go over. There was really no way for me to get to the house unless I broke the padlock or somehow climbed up the fence. I was pretty sure the house wasn't getting used though, so I decided to just leave. I got back in my car and tried to back out. My front tires that were on the driveway got stuck in the snow. I tried to turn my tires in different directions and it seemed to be working a little bit. I kept doing that, then went forward a bit and then back again, to try to wiggle my way out. I was doing that for what seemed like forever, probably like 5 minutes. And then I started to get really nervous. I pulled a shovel out of my trunk and started to scoop the snow out from under my car. Once I thought it was good enough, I tried to back out again. It seemed to work a little bit, but it wasn't enough to fully get my car unstuck. Then I saw a truck start to drive up the road. At first I was almost happy because I thought no one would be out here. They slowed down when they saw my car and then started to drive over to my side of the road. I assumed they were going to get out or roll down their window and ask if I needed help. I turned around to wait for the truck to stop, but instead of pulling over to the side of the road, they parked directly behind my car. I remember how my stomach sank, and I got this really terrible feeling in my gut. They pulled their truck directly and closely behind my car so I couldn't back up, even if I tried. If I had tried to back out of that spot, I would have T-boned them in reverse. I had to turn my body around to try to see the driver, but they didn't get out or roll down their windows. They just sat in the truck, blocking me in. I couldn't see the driver very well because it was dark, but I knew it was a man. I think he was waiting for me to get out of my vehicle, but I just sat there and kept my doors locked. We sat there for what felt like a really long time, but was probably only a couple of minutes, when another car started driving up the road. The truck then starts to drive out from behind my vehicle and starts going up the road before the other car reaches mine. The car doesn't stop, but keeps on driving behind the truck. This is when I see the truck pull over on the side of the road and wait for the other car to drive by. This is when I decided I had to get out of this driveway because I was not waiting for that truck to come back for me. I put the car in reverse and instead of trying to inch it out, I literally slammed on the gas and my car shot out of the driveway backwards. I almost went into the ditch on the other side of the road, but I slammed on my brakes just in time. I then slammed on the gas again and drove my car in the opposite direction of the truck. I looked in my rearview mirror once while driving away, saw that the truck had started to drive away in the other direction. I was so relieved, but instantly my eyes started to tear up because I really didn't know what just happened. I can't say what the other person was going to do, but deep in my gut, I felt like I had just escaped something terrible. The road is a dangerous place for many reasons. I was working late at night at Colonial Williamsburg. It was my job to turn off the lights at the governor's mansion and a few other places at the end of the night. I got done and was walking to my car and my boss called me and said that I had missed a light. I was pretty new, so I just said yes sir and headed back. Sure enough, a light way up in the attic was visibly on from outside, so I went to the top floor and climbed up there on the little ladder. Once up there were no lights on. I don't think too much of it at this point, so I went all the way down and back outside. Once outside, I started back to my car. My boss sent me a text and asked if I was going to take care of it or not. I told him I did, and he was upset because he thought I was lying. I headed back to the mansion, and sure enough, the light was on. I headed all the way back up there, and the light was off again. I was literally staring out the window that was lit from the outside. At this point, I figured someone was screwing with me, so I headed back out in a huff. I got downstairs, and my boss met me at the door, upset. "Are you going to turn that dang light out or not?" "It was out. Are you screwing with me?" So we both headed up there, and the light was off. This makes no fucking sense. There was the distinct odor of a candle, and what appears to be the haze of smoke around the window. I have no idea what that was all about. A little backstory. So I was a security guard for this local company in my area. I was assigned to a water park with another guard who was regularly there keeping watch. He was to train me and show me around and tell me what codes opened what doors. I first noticed how quick he was to enter and leave the property. He never wanted to spend more than 10 minutes inside the property before he would be eager to leave. Our first night was simple. There was nothing exciting or interesting going on, so our night dragged. After a few hours, I asked him if he experienced anything unusual while working here. He told me he's had some problems with people trying to enter the property without permission, but that's about it. He also told me he hated working there because of his encounters with these people. He said that they creeped him out because of how sneaky they were. He didn't really want to tell me much because he was afraid I would leave the post. That should have been a red flag for me, but I was too excited to let anything like that scare me. A few more hours later, and our shift is over, so we clock out and go home for the day. The next night, my boss called me to explain that the security guard, my partner, had resigned. I was a little upset because now I was to work a two-man post all by myself with barely any knowledge on the place. After a couple of weeks, I started to get the hang of the place and created my own routine with no issues at all. No break-ins, no vandalism, nothing. It's now 2 a.m. and I was outside at the front of the property completing my rounds when I heard a door slam from inside. I jumped because of how loud it was. As I started to walk back into the property, I continued to hear doors opening and closing. I could feel myself getting nervous because it was my first situation I've ever had at this place. As I walked inside and started to check the doors and complete a round to make sure there was no one on the property, I got to this corridor where there was a set of stairs that led down to a door that was wide open. I walked down the stairs to close and lock the door because I was too scared to take a look inside. As I turned around to head up the stairs, I noticed a man dressed in all black standing at top of the stairs. I took a step back and realized I'm cornered. If he was to try anything, I would have nowhere to run or hide. So I politely asked him if he needed my help. He didn't reply. I then asked him how he got into the property. He still didn't reply. He slowly turned his head and snapped his fingers. Then from the left side of the staircase, another man slowly crawled to his side like a dog on all fours. I then turned around and kicked the door open, ran inside, and locked myself in the bathroom as I called my boss and told him what I witnessed. They sent an armed security guard to my position to complete a walkthrough, to make sure I was safe. As I got the call that the area was clear, I came out and told him everything from start to finish. I realized that they didn't believe me, so I clocked out and went home for the night. The next morning, I received a call from my boss explaining that they checked the security footage from the night before, and what they told me horrified me. Every hour when I would complete my rounds inside the property, those same two men would follow me through the facility as if they were stalking me, like as if it was a game to them. After that, I asked for a new position because I'm too horrified to work at that water park. I now know why my trainer didn't want to work there anymore. This happened when me and my wife got married in the fall. I'll never be so grateful that I have a habit of locking doors. Our wedding day was coming to an end. Family and friends were slowly starting to depart as me and my wife took pictures and chatted with some of the guests who stayed a little longer and were just having a great time. It was a great day and a lot of fond memories were made, but what was least expected is what happened that night as we were on our way to our honeymoon. As me and my wife said goodbye to the last of the guests around 9 p.m., we got into the car and headed home. We had our bags packed prior to the wedding day for Cancun and were ready to go. I live in Washington State, and we were in a bit of a hurry because instead of flying out from Seattle Airport in SeaTac like normal people do, it was a lot cheaper for us to drive up north to Canada and fly out from a Canadian airport. Also, me and my wife thought it'd be fun to have a little road trip to Canada and then fly out from Canada to Cancun. Plus, it was only 3.5 hour drive for us, and cheaper, so we headed out. We had a great time driving, blasting music, talking about Cancun, and just being excited about the new chapter in our lives. My wife slowly started to fall asleep, being exhausted from the wedding and whatnot. We were halfway to Canada. At this point, we were no longer in the city area, but more a wooded area with fewer cars and fewer people the more we drove, practically seeing no one on the road. By the time it was 3 a.m., we had some extra time on our hands, and I was starting to fall asleep too, so I pulled over to a gas station to get some Red Bull to keep me awake. I pulled into the gas station that was completely empty and parked the car to see my wife asleep. I told her I'm taking the keys and locking her inside, that I'd be right back. Not sure if she could hear me, but she kinda motioned her hand around like people normally do when they're too tired to care. I come back around 6 minutes later to find my wife shaking and crying. I was confused and freaking out a bit because I wasn't sure why she was crying. She couldn't even get words out at first. Later, when she calmed down, she told me what happened. Apparently, she did hear me when I told her I'd take the keys and be right back, and as she was sleeping, she was awoken by tapping on the driver's side window. Being too tired to get up or even open her eyes, she lazily went for the unlock button on the passenger side of the door. As she was going for it, she froze. A thought passed her mind. Then she remembered. Didn't he say he had the keys? Why would he need me to unlock the door for him? That's when she heard a woman's voice mumbling from the driver's side. She turned herself around to look at the window and saw a woman, long black hair with wide set eyes, and a crooked smile on her face. She couldn't hear what she was saying at first, but then she heard what she was saying. She kept repeating in a mumbled tone, "Are you tired?" over and over again. She freaked out and told the woman to leave her alone. The woman laughed and told my wife that she was too tired. The woman never took her eyes off her and tried the door handle several times. At this point, my wife was close to tears and attempted to call me, but as she did, she heard what sounded like a phone buzz and realized I left my phone in the car. Out of options, my wife started to honk the horn trying to scare off the woman while also maybe getting my attention. The woman still had her gaze on her and started mumbling more while laughing and trying the door handle again. Then she mentioned something about someone named Sarah and asked my wife if she knew her. After a few more minutes of mumbling, she left. To my wife's words, the minute she left, I came out of the gas station, so my wife broke down. I don't know how I didn't hear the honking of the car, and I still feel bad for leaving my phone in the car. My wife also added that one of the creepier things about that woman is that she didn't look homeless or dirty or anything. In fact, she seemed normal and well kept. My wife says she'll never forget the woman's wide-set eyes and the gaze she had on her with that smile. It also chills me to think what would have happened if my wife never realized that I had the keys, or if she never heard me about locking her inside and opened the door while faced the other way. I don't know what those women's intentions were, but if I couldn't hear the honk or horn, I'm not sure I hear screams either. One time I went to the bar with one of my friends. I had just turned 21, so I hadn't been to too many bars up to that point. My friend was drinking on the way to the bar, so he was already pretty drunk when we got there. When I sat at the bar, a cute girl came and talked to me and my friend. She said her name was Candace, and I noticed she had really bright red hair. I assumed she dyed it. It was pretty, but unnatural. Anyways, the girl was flirting with me and my friend. She could tell my friend was already drunk. To be honest, I played along like I was drunk already too, since it seemed to be working for my friend. I don't know if she was trying to get free drinks, so I told her we didn't have much money. She offered to buy us drinks. She kept buying us drinks, and I started to get confused as to who she liked between me and my friend. My friend went to the bathroom. Before he came back, he was kicked out by the bouncers. He was too drunk. Candace and I went outside with him. She kept telling him to go home with her. He was so out of it he could barely answer her. I told her he was too drunk and that I couldn't let him go anywhere. I didn't want him to wake up hungover in some random house with no car and no idea what happened. Candace kept pushing it, saying that she would take care of him, but I told her no because I had to stay with him. I was more sober than him. He was my responsibility. I told her the only way he was going anywhere was if I tagged along. I assumed she thought that I was jealous or cock-blocking, but my friend could barely stand and lost interest in Candace already at that point. She immediately started flirting with me and offered to get my friend a taxi to drive him home, and said we can go to her place alone. At this point I had a few drinks and I was pretty buzzed, so I agreed. We took my friend to the taxi and walked to her car. I stumbled slightly on the way to her car. "Whoa, you're pretty drunk, huh?" she said, smiling as she held onto my arm. "Yeah," I said. I don't know why, but I just felt slightly shy and anxious. Everything was just happening too easy for me, so I felt uneasy. We got in her car and we drove down the street. "Wanna stop at the liquor store and get some more to drink? I'll buy it, so don't worry about paying," she offered. I didn't want to drink any more than I already did. I was already buzzed and wanted to be able to carry myself through the rest of the night. Sometimes I make myself look stupid when I'm drunk, so I didn't want to ruin anything with Candace more than I already did earlier by telling her my friend was too drunk. I told her I was already drunk enough, but she insisted. I didn't want to seem lame, so I told her to get me a pint of liquor with some apple juice to chase it. She went to the store and came out with a lot more than just a pint. I assumed she wanted to drink more also. I assumed she wanted to drink more also. That's why she got a fifth instead of a pint. On the car ride we passed the bottle back and forth, but she took tiny sips. I tried to take tiny sips, but she kept passing me the bottle and telling me to drink. I somehow managed to drink all of my apple juice. I'm pretending to drink the bottle by spitting the liquor in the apple juice bottle. I tossed the apple juice bottle full of liquor out the window before she saw it. I didn't want her to know I was acting drunker than I was. She actually believed I was sloppy drunk when I was simply buzzed. I took a couple more sips of liquor and finished the bottle. Throughout the car ride, I called her the wrong name a couple of times to get a reaction out of her. She didn't react to it. She just kept letting me call her Carla without correcting me. For some reason, I thought she lied to me about her name initially. We drove her to her house. I pretended to trip and stumble into her front door. She helped me walk inside by holding me up. She opened her front door, which was unlocked. We walked into her house, she closed her front door, and then locked it. I thought that was strange, but assumed she didn't want anybody walking in on us. I told her that I had to use the bathroom. I walked into her bathroom, locked the door, and looked in the mirror. I just felt strange. I felt like something was off. I felt myself becoming more drunk from finishing the bottle earlier. I turned on the sink to make noise and made myself puke up the liquor I drunk. I flushed and went to the sink and started drinking the tap water out of my hands to sober up. I just didn't want to be drunk, but I still wanted to hook up with Candace, so I just pretended to be drunk. I turned the sink off and I could hear her talking to someone. "He's drunk as hell. He can barely stand up. You do it." Who was she talking to? And do what? I walked out of the bathroom and into the living room. The moment I stepped into the living room, I saw her walking into another room. All I could see was the back of her head. That strange, very bright red hair going to another room. I didn't see her face or anything. I just saw her kind of walk fast into the room. The living room was pretty dark. "Hey, where are you going?" I slurred like I was drunk. She walked back into the dark living room and up to me. "Let's go in my room," she said. I looked at her bright red hair and then into her eyes. They were different. Her face was different. It was another girl with the same hair. That's when I realized. It was another girl with the same wig on. It was a wig the whole time. She had changed it with the girl from earlier for whatever reason. My heart felt like it stopped, but I tried to look like I had no idea it was a different girl. I kinda smiled at her and told her I just needed to use the bathroom one more time, and told her sorry I was so drunk. She said it's fine, just hurry up in there. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I heard her whisper something to someone again. This time, I think I heard a male voice whisper back. I honestly didn't concentrate on listening to exactly what she said. Something sketchy was going on, and I had to get out of that house. I opened the bathroom window and jumped straight out of it and ran faster than I've ever ran in my life. I didn't look behind me or anything. I just ran through the backyard, jumped the fence, ran through someone else's yard, hit a road, and ran towards the main road. I ran into the store and stood straight at the front of the store in front of the camera. I called a taxi and went home. I tried to think about what happened that night. What was she, or they, planning that night? Why did she tell me a fake name? Why was she trying to get my friend and I so drunk? I thought maybe it was a robbery, but she kept spending money on us. She kept buying us drinks and even paid for my friend's taxi cab. And mostly, why did she wear a wig that she gave to another girl to wear? Who was she talking to? What did it mean? And what was in that room they tried to lure me into? A little update, the next day after this incident, I went back to the house with a couple of friends to see what was going on. Nobody was there. No cars, no people, nothing. Just an empty house. I ended up finding out that the house was a summer rental, and whoever those people were, they broke into that house and used it for only that night and never came back. I'm a 29-year-old man from the Philippines. Even though this incident occurred back in 2013, I still find myself haunted by it every time I return to my hometown. At the time, I was just an 18-year-old college student. It was the night of our department's socialization party, which had wrapped up around midnight. As the only one among my friends with a car, I'd always taken on the role of the designated driver. After dropping my friends off at their homes, I was parking in my usual spot, just a few houses away from my own, due to the limited parking in our area. As I was about to exit the car, I noticed a girl standing near the entrance of the alleyway leading to my home, and several others, wearing a shirt with our department's logo. I assumed she had just walked back from the party. In front of her, a man in his late 20s, clad in a hoodie, stood ominously, seemingly blocking her path. The girl locked eyes with me, and I immediately recognized her expression. It was a silent plea for help. Instinct kicked in. I grabbed my bag and stepped out of the car. The man, noticing my presence, began to walk into the alleyway. When I reached the girl, he had vanished from sight. It felt as though whatever threatening situation had occurred moments before was over, and I was tempted to walk away, but then I caught sight of the strange man again. He was leaning against the wall of a nearby house, his gaze fixed on me. A chill ran down my spine, and just then, the girl called out from behind me. Her voice trembled with fear, and I saw her approach visibly shaken. "Can you walk me to my apartment at the end of the alleyway?" she asked, explaining that the man had been silently blocking her way. I glanced back at the man. He appeared intoxicated, perhaps drunk or on drugs. We began to walk, our breaths shallow as we passed by him. After putting some distance between us, I glanced back. To my horror, he was following us. We had already passed my house at that point, but I couldn't leave this girl to face him alone. As fear coursed through me, she suddenly broke into a full sprint, and I had no choice but to keep pace with her. We reached the gate to her apartment, and she hastily swung it open, slamming it shut behind us. We then dashed into the building, where a second gate stood, this one smaller, likely designed to keep pets from escaping. She opened it, and we slipped through just as the sound of the man approaching the first gate reached our ears. We bolted up the stairs, making our way to the third floor. Breathless, the girl knocked urgently but softly at her apartment door. After what felt like an eternity, it swung open, revealing her friends, a guy and a girl around her age. She looked bewildered, but quickly locked the door behind us and led us into the bedroom. They turned off the lights, and we just sat there silently with our hearts pounding. The girl broke down in tears, recounting the terrifying events to her friends. She revealed that the man had been following her for 10 to 15 minutes, and she expressed relief at having seen me. Unsure of what to do next, I called my aunt, who was staying at our house that night. Thankfully, she answered swiftly. I urged her to call the police. At this time, we could now hear the man pacing around the apartment, seemingly looking for us. He was mumbling something we couldn't hear well from the other side of the door. A few minutes later, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was my uncle, a policeman, reassuring me that the help was on the way. What felt like hours dragged on, and eventually the police arrived. My uncle instructed me via phone to come downstairs and recount the ordeal to the officers. They informed us that they had seen the man wandering around the gate and eventually into the far end of the alleyway. Once the police had finished their inquiries, they allowed me to go home. I recounted the entire story to my aunt, who urged me to get some rest. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me as my mind raced with thoughts of the strange man. What if he had caught up with us, armed with a knife or some weapon? I fought to dispel the terrifying images racing through my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he might be watching me in the dark, a knife glinting menacingly in his hand. I worked overnight in a very old but still functional hospital. The building was in despair, but still had patients and staff. We were installing gigabit Ethernet to the top floor and corners so they could put a data center up there. I was in a remote comms cupboard around 1 a.m. The only other people in the building were nursing staff and patients, who were locked, yes, locked in the wards downstairs. So I'm busy clearing out this old comms cupboard when the door behind me shuts. It was wedged open with a fire extinguisher. I didn't hear anything or see anyone. I switched my phone torch on and opened the door, and the fire extinguisher was gone. It must have taken me 5 seconds to turn on my torch and leave the room. The corridor the room was on was long, probably 100 feet in each direction, only a few doors off the corridor into old patients' rooms. I tried every door. Locked. I couldn't find the fire extinguisher either. I checked the room, behind the door, in the bins. I just couldn't find it. So I went down to the security office and reported the incident, suggesting there may be somebody unauthorized loose in the building. They played the CCTV back along the corridor, and sure enough, some guy dressed in all black with bare feet just walks up silently to the cupboard I'm in and grabs the fire extinguisher and legs it down the corridor extremely quickly. The security dudes flew into action, but the guy was never caught.